This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so the topic for today's webinar session is leadership and stakeholder management, and it's going to be presented by Mr. Sudhir. Speaking to Sudhir a few days ago, he said it was a toss-up between joining the army and becoming an astrophysicist. Nevertheless, Sudhir took up IT instead and has never looked back since. His wealth of experience comes from 22 years with Cognizant across 3 continents. He has excelled in various roles, including client engagement, global delivery, program management, consulting, and even mergers and acquisitions. He also works as an independent leadership coach with individuals and a growth catalyst with Cohen, spelled as Koen, Meta Consulting, in running customized leadership workshops for corporates. He is a certified Marshall Goldsmith leadership coach and also holds a life coaching certification from Certified Coaches Alliance based in Canada. He is a member of the Professional Speakers Association of India. Well, before joining Cognizant in 95, a previous job took him on board a crude oil tanker for a life-changing journey halfway across the world from India. Anyway, on the side, he loves to be physically and mentally fit, spends time with family, loves reading books, listening to music, travel, and interact with people through talks, blogs, or discussions. So without further ado, it's over to you, Mr. Sudhir.
Thank you very much, Vijay. Can everybody see me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for the lovely intro, and it's a privilege to be here speaking to all of you, and thank you for joining here, especially during lockdown. Being locked into a room for an hour during lockdown is also, I'm sure, a pain, but I hope we will have some interaction as we go along. Typically, I love to do this in front of people because it means I can see reactions, I can have people talk to me, and that's cost a lot of magic. But then, let's try and do this online as we go along. Okay, this is a little bit, okay. I'm just trying to move. So how do I move the slides?
Yeah, it should just see, maybe you can just do an up and down arrow key or a right or left key.
For some reason, it isn't moving.
Yeah, if you just do the present option in the beginning and then do right and left keys. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now it works.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. So what I did after 25 years is I got into coaching, and one of the best things I did, and I don't regret that, is I got into working with Cohen Meta Consulting. That's the company that I'm a growth catalyst with, where we will focus on organizational and people transformation. Now, the reason I call that out is not because of what I did, but because of my colleague in that company who is brilliant at creating leadership programs, and he has created some lovely programs that work on people through self-inquiry. So we don't give answers, through mindset shifts, and most importantly, we work on the operating systems of people. And so he's a whiz at customizing workshops, leadership workshops, and it came out when we did a session for an IT global major. We started in 2018, and we started with one session. We had some bad experiences with other partners, so they said we'll give you one session. Starting with that, we ended up actually doing it across 1 year, covering 750 people across India and the US, and the results are brilliant. The results are brilliant because people came back with some wonderful stories of how they changed professionally and personally. So there were stories of someone who went from being a micromanager to actually creating leaders within his team. There was somebody who, for 2 years, he had been an architect, could not get a seat at the table of his client, and he ended up, sitting at the table of his client once. There were some people who made peace with their family members, the son, someone with her mother-in-law, and so on. Anyway, I don't know how she made peace with her mother-in-law. I can't explain that right now. So we covered two aspects: managing stakeholders and managing self during that period. So a lot of talk was done about leadership, but why I'm saying this is most of the results came from people putting it into practice and shifting their minds. But my first experience of leadership came through the tanker. Okay, it's stuck again.
Sudhir, would you want me to present? I can do the slides.
Yeah, maybe you can do that if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah. Yeah, if you carry on talking, I'll do the slides.
Okay. So you're presenting now?
I'm going to do that now. Short.
Okay.
I think it works on your side, but I can do it now.
Okay, great. So I sailed, on a tanker in winter of 1993 from India. It was all okay until we hit the Atlantic. We went from the Arabian Sea to the Persian Gulf to Red Sea to the Mediterranean. It's all great sailing. We went to the Straits of Gibraltar into the Atlantic. One day into the Atlantic is when the trouble started. We were hit by a huge storm, and the waves were amazingly big. The ship rolled, went over, came down, went over again, came down. So for 3 days, we were smashed around like matchwood. And this ship was about half a kilometer long and 100 meters wide. So you can actually imagine how big it was. It was a 150,000 tonner. All through that, the captain, the chief officer, the chief engineer, and a second in charge in the engineering space, they were very calm. I mean, they would come together, talk about the situation, give instructions to people, and people would look back at them and say, okay, everything is going to be all right. Let's carry on. And it was a revelation for me, because this is the first time I was looking at leaders in the middle of a crisis. And in my mind, it was a crisis. Maybe it wasn't in theirs, because we would end up facing bigger storms, one of which we outran the storm and a ship coming behind us sank in the mid-Atlantic. But that was my first experience of a storm. But now the word leadership is being used quite a bit in our day and age. So I've got a question for you. So can we go to the next slide, Vijay? Yeah. So on the chat window, go ahead and mention one action word that comes to mind, which defines a leader. Not a leadership trait like empathy, not a leadership style like autocratic, an action word. 30 seconds. Go ahead now.
I'm just going to read out quickly. Motivator, influencer, humanity, inspirational, trust, comfort, humble, transparent, mentorship, team player, visionary, decision making, putting first. Okay, I've got a Tamil word, talaiva, responsible, communicator. Some amazing responses. Resilient.
It is. Resilient, walking the talk.
I think we've got the entire dictionary here, haven't we?
I know.
Walking the talk, headman, consensus. Okay, so a few of them are now sentences. It has to be one
Yeah,
word.
I would have loved it to be one word, but if you're typing a sentence in this time, you guys are super fast.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, communicator, in charge. Okay, I think we can take that as a hyphenated word,
Hey,
in charge.
my wife managing me. That's new.
Okay, I know who that is from. That is Sivaram. Yeah, that is typical of him. Decision maker.
Okay.
Okay, right. Thanks,
Sivaram,
guys.
we'll get you to talk about this a little later. That's pretty good. But look at all these words, beautiful words, wonderful words. Come back to this. Who actually decides who's a leader? Society. Okay. Society does. Others or team. The team should accept it. The team, followers, team members. So what we are coming up with, guys, and that's, thank you very much for this. So it means that somewhere people, stakeholders are basically coming back and saying, I recognize you as a leader. Agreed? So let's go on to the next one. Leadership is always assumed, not given. Brilliant. So determining the effectiveness of a leader comes from stakeholders. So that's what you're telling me from all of this. People around us, people who are impacted by leaders, the team members, and so on, right? And they consider folks a leader. So it's assumed, not given. That's a brilliant statement, Kaushik. We'll come back to that in a bit. Which brings me to another question on the next slide, and that's about what happens to leadership as you go up the ranks? What happens to authority as you go up the ranks? Does the authority increase or decrease? Does it go up or go down with the increase? So let's take an example. For a CEO, does the CEO's authorities with his or her critical stakeholders go up or go down compared to somebody who's either a manager or a leader? So on the next slide, Vijay. If you can bring the next slide up. Yeah. It goes up, goes up, goes up, authority goes up. So that's what you're saying. With the critical stakeholders of a CEO, goes up, okay. Decreases as you go up, okay. That's interesting. Any more? Increases and is responsible outcomes. Authority and responsibility goes up. Responsibility increases. Responsibility increases. Responsibility increases. Authority proportionally increases. So Shanta, you said need not be. What does? So it need not increase. Okay, more delegation. All right. What happens to the authority? Goes up. Okay. So let's get on to the next slide and look at who the primary stakeholders of a CEO are. If you look at the stakeholders of a CEO, and basically your Peter Drucker saying that the CEO is the link between the inside of an organization and the outside of an organization. Therefore, the stakeholders lie on both sides. And the insides are obviously the employees, and the outsides are the customers, the shareholders, which could include the board of directors, the investors, the business partners, industry analysts, media, and the government authorities, which means the authority works only with employees. Can the authority of a CEO work with a customer? Obviously not. Shareholder? No. They can't go and say, do this. Business partners? Maybe, to an extent. Industry analysts? Absolutely not. Media? No. There's no way they can dictate authority. And national government and regulatory authorities, obviously, it doesn't. Which means out of all of these primary stakeholders, a CEO is left with his or her authority only with the employees and to some extent with the business partners. With all others, they would have to work differently. So which means this is the way it works today. In the past, authority dictated leadership. So if you are in a position of authority, so monarchy, authoritarian roles, they dictated it. But today, we become a more matrixed and flattened world. And because it's a matrix and flattened world, authority ceases to exist. So leadership itself has made a transformation from being an authority based to what Kaushik says, to influence based. So if you go on to the next slide, please. Vijay. So today, the need for a leader is not about authority. It's about how much influence they can exert on their stakeholders so that the stakeholders actually align with them. So the ability to influence without authority is becoming more and more important in this world. And the more we start practicing them today, the easier it will be as we go up the chain. So I had the same view that, hey, CEO must have absolute authority. But when you really look at it, the CEO is balancing roles with all the different stakeholders. They don't have authority. They have to use influence. So where does influence really come from? If you look at it, influence comes from two areas. One, it comes from building relationships with people, the ability to build relationships. And second, it comes from personal branding. So when you look at personal branding, what I'm talking about is the ability to have executive presence. So you walk into a room, the leader walks into a room and everybody turns around and looks at him or her and says, what has he or she got to say? And you look at it. And that is why today we are seeing leadership at different levels. It is no longer position based. It has become a trait. And the trait needs influence. And influence now needs the ability to build relationships. So let's see how we can do that. Go on to the next slide, please. Vijay. So to talk about it, and because we are in the area of COVID-19, we are all confined at home, and a lot of work is being done on the phone or on video conference. I chose a case study that talked about connecting with someone across continents for the first time. So this is something that happened to a friend of mine, a good friend, and he was a global program manager for a career architecture program that was impacting 30,000 people globally. And he had a 7-member core team in India, but that's about all. And they had to work with every region to implement the career architecture program that was useful was important for all the people, the associates and employees working for the organization. So in this specific case, the team engages with Helen, an HR manager from the UK, and that name has been changed so that you don't have anyone who's been there doesn't identify her. And the objective was to get her to manage the program in the UK. So the program team calls her up, sets up a call with her, and she calls her up and says, hey, Helen, you know what? We are running this program. This is very important for the organization. And, you know, we need you to step up and run this for us from the UK. So Helen comes back and says, look, I don't have the time to do it. I have too much work. I have a lot of people to manage, and sorry, can't be done. So they say, you know what, I understand that, but the situation is such that this is very important for the organization. You need to align. So, you know, you've got to do this. And she says, hey, no. So can you go on to the next slide, please, Vijay? And she says, no, I'm very busy. And, you know, it can't be done. And so they go back and forth, and the team is talking to her about the importance of the program. And they reach a point where they say, I'm trying to convince you. What is your problem? What are you saying? And you're only working with 200 people. You should have the time for this. Because in India, we work, an HR manager works with about 800 to 1,000 people. So she basically says, I'm not interested in continuing this conversation. I cannot work on this. And she slams the phone down. And they come back and they tell the program manager, look, you know what? She's rude. She has an ego. She has a problem. I don't think we can work with her. And the program manager is sitting wondering, hey, what do I do about this? So he said, he says, let me pick up the phone and call her. He picks up the phone, calls her. She doesn't respond. Then he tries her a second time. She picks up the phone and says, look, I don't have the time to do this right now. And she bangs the phone down. So he said, okay, let me try it another way. And he sends her an email asking for time. She comes back and says, your team already spoke to me. I told them I don't have the time. What's your problem? So he said, just give me half an hour, 30 minutes. That's all I need just to talk to you about this. And she says, okay. And he gets half an hour with her. So it starts the call with, you know, we got off on the wrong foot, our team and you. So you know how important this is to the organization. Tell me what your workload is like. Why are you not able to take it? So she says, you know what, my day is full. I have 200 people to take care of. I really cannot take on more than this. He says, okay. You know, Helen, in India, we cover up to 800 to 1,000 people. You're telling me that you have 200 people. Can you talk about that a little more? Because I want to understand why that is a constraint for you. She says, you know, in India, you're basically working with 800 to 1,000 people in one building. I have to work with 200 people across the length and breadth of the country, which means I have to be on the road all the time. And that struck him. So she's right. So he said, okay, every country is now going to be doing this. I know this is not really a part of your priority right now. Sooner or later, since you are the HR manager, it's going to become important for you. Now, what is it? I don't want you to be caught on the wrong foot that you haven't been making progress. So what can I do for you so that this gets into your priority list? And then she got up and she said, okay, there are some things that I need help with. If you can get help from the business, then we can make this work. So I said, okay, let's do that. And I will get help for you from the business, and then we can take this forward. So he puts the phone down, gets help from the business, and that relationship matures over time. So we're going to do two things here. One, I'm on this slide with some of the conversation snippets. What's wrong with the first one? What is happening with the first one? And I've marked it in red. So why is that a problem? What does it indicate? The first, I understand your situation, but this is more important to the organization. What is it telling the person speaking in front? Anyone on the chat window? Conflict of priorities, yes. Authoritative direction, okay. Authoritative. Not empathizing, very good. My task is more important than yours. Excellent. Bossy, will win, lose. Commenting without getting the details. Great. Trying to show authority rather than influencing with personal. Great. Undermines others' role. But and how are powerful words that they are. Why are they, Sendil? Great. Lack of motivation. So most of you got it right. Thank you so much. This is great. When someone says, I understand your situation, but this is more important. The but is a beautiful word in the English language, the but with one T, right? And what it does at that moment, it negates everything that's been said before. So someone spends about 5 minutes speaking, and then I go back to them and say, I understand you, but in one word, I'm negating everything. I don't believe you. And that's a message it sends to the person. Imagine how many times we've done this, that when somebody is actually speaking, we are already formulating the response to the person in the back of the mind. And that manifests itself through the but. I understand you, but, because we're so focused on proving that we are right. So many of you actually said it very beautifully. So when we say that, but this is more important to the organization, we are negating everything. So there was an experiment that was done with Marshall Goldsmith when we were here in Chennai. I was part of that. We were in a room with about 30 or 40 people, and we had this very similar conversations. And there were people who were saying, oh, I understand this, but. And he said, you know what? Anybody who uses but or because, and I think someone said that on the stream, anyone who uses but and because puts 50 rupees on the table that goes to charity. We have to be very careful about that word. And at the end of 4 hours, we collected 12,000 rupees for charity. And that's how much we were noticing. The second one, I'm trying to convince you. What is the problem with that? I'm trying to convince. What does the word convince mean? Yeah, I know, that's great, charity, Anand. And it taught us a lesson too. Trying to convince you. What is the problem with that word there? Pushing, enforce. Beautiful. So convince basically says that, thank you. I don't know who admin is, but enforce, authority. So I am trying to convince you, sends a message that I am right and you are wrong. Beautiful, Dylan. Thank you very much. You better listen. I am right, you are wrong. And we'll be very careful about using those terms. And yes, you're being stubborn. Why are you being stubborn? Because you're wrong. What's your problem? So what happens is that the words that are being used tend to convey a message to the person in front. Exactly, you didn't understand, and I am advising. My way or the highway, yeah. Sundaresan, yes. So, and in all of this, it ends up creating a perception the other person is not listening. When in reality, what that the program team wasn't actually listening. They weren't ready to listen. So they thought our reality is the same as that person's reality. So we go to the next slide, Vijay, if you don't mind. And after the program manager called and talked, and things started getting better, go on to the next slide, please. So here's what emerged out of that. The first thing is seek to understand, then to be understood. Ask the right questions. He asked why is it that 200 people, managing 200 people is a problem for you? I mean, the assumption was, oh, 200 people, that's less. But by asking the right questions, he tried to understand. He sat back and listened. And that's called active listening, where we're not actually trying to formulate responses to what the person is saying. Shift the focus. He shifted the focus from himself onto the person in front. So he didn't say, this is important to me. He said, you know what, this is going to come around to you. When other people are implementing it in their regions, you are going to be caught if you've not done it. So tell me what I can do to enable you to do it. So the focus was on the other person, and figure out what's in it for the other person. Why should the other person even, agree to do this? So for this, what one person's reality may not be the others. This is the case of 200 versus the 800, 1,000 person. And exactly understanding stakeholders' interests is very important. So if we start focusing on the problem rather than the people, then we'll step back and say, I'm not here to win. I'm here to ensure that we focus on the problem and both of us do it collaboratively. That's a word that you used. Krishnan, you used that word very well. Help me to help you. Yeah, Vasan. And there are cultural differences. With the British, they are very clear about making sure we set meetings. Second, they are not rude. They are very much focused to the point. They will say it as it is. And it doesn't matter whether it's the manager speaking to a director or the senior director or anybody. It's just that that's the way they are. And the sooner we realize how other cultures work, the easier it will be to form relationships. And this becomes difficult, especially over the phone. So a little bit of preparation is necessary in order to ensure that relationships are built, especially when you can't see the person, right? Let's work together for mutual benefits. Exactly. They do not overcommit. So he ended up resolving the challenges and establishing a relationship, and that went over a period of time. Now, can you go on to the next? Yeah. So speaking about asking questions, how long are your meetings? And do some of them go on and on? Do you have challenges with your meetings? Sometimes with meetings, especially review meetings, right? I hope your boss is not on the line, Vikram. All meetings go off. Yeah, a lot of them. Okay, great. Of course not. 6 weeks, same topic. All right. Okay, so asking the right questions is very important. As and when boss feels we are project managers should manage well. Yes, should is a good term. No definite agenda, hence drag. Okay, at times focus is lost. Great. So I'm going to talk to you about what a specific organization did to handle their meetings very effectively. And the name of this organization is Pixar. So we go on to the next slide. All of you know Pixar. It's one of the most successful animation studios that has produced so many hits across 2 decades now. Now the thing about Pixar is there are scenes that require over thousands of frames, and a 4-second scene requires over 100 frames, and each frame requires 12 hours for an animator to produce, and all of them have to be reviewed collectively between the managers, animators, the creative guys, and so on. So many people get involved. Now our story starts with Toy Story 2, and after the success of Toy Story 1, what happened at that point in time is they had about a year and a half to do Toy Story 2. The team that actually did Toy Story 1, that was a great success, got involved with Bug's Life. So the Toy Story 2 team was quite an inexperienced team. So they worked on it, but when they were about 9 months away and this experienced team came back, while this smaller team was actually quite good, the quality of the content was pretty bad. So they had 2 choices: either throw it out or use those 9 months to come out. That's quite a stretch. So what they decided was that they would throw it out and produce it over those 9 months. And it is terrible when they do it, because there is so much work involved. People were working day and night. Many of them actually started getting, sick. Many of them actually started getting sick. They were, yes, Steve Jobs started Pixar and Disney bought it. Exactly, Sudhir. And the whole thing came to a head when an animator who'd been working consistently drove his child to work. He was supposed to drop the baby off at a crash. Instead, he left the baby in the car in the parking lot until his wife reminded him, and they rushed back. They found the child unconscious, and that affected the CEO Catmull so much they decided they had to do something about the organization to make it more positive, make it better for the employees, make it a more relaxed environment. They knew that a lot of this stress was coming from the way they were functioning as a team. So the first thing that they came back and said is, we want to make this more positive. Therefore, when people work on it, we want to encourage them. We have to create a team bonding. So they said, look to the right, to the left, make sure that you support the person right next to you. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when you give feedback, take it, but don't defend it at that point in time. And third, have a consistent process to handle this. But the main thing they introduced, a term they introduced, was plussing. Now, plussing is a very critical term, which says if you want to do a review, do a review. If you want to point out a mistake, point it out, but do not talk about it if you don't have a solution for it. So let's go on to the next slide, Vijay. So critique an idea only if you can add a constructive suggestion. So comments such as, I don't like it, but I don't know why I don't like it, they were not acceptable. So the objective was to make a partner look good, praise the person, make it a positive environment, keep the criticism focused on the work. Second, build on top of the work. Don't destroy it, build on top of it. And third, and this is for the people who are actually getting the criticism, so listen and respond. You don't have to actually defend it at that point in time. Maybe 5 people may come up with 10 responses, 10 suggestions, but take it back and see what can be implemented, what cannot be implemented, and move it forward. But the main thing in here was that when you have a review, do not critique it if you cannot give a constructive suggestion on it. And that actually was a magic formula that worked for them beautifully. So there are 2 ways of looking at this. If you go on to the next slide, please, Vijay. You amplify the work or you silence the person. When you silence, so that's the thing. Silencing the person focuses on the person. Amplification basically says, oh, I like what you did, but on top of this, hey, here is something you can do. For example, they said, here is his character. Now you could look at the character and say, I don't like the way his eyes go. But that's criticism. There is no constructive nature. So what they would do is they would say, have you considered what could happen if he rolled his eyes to the left? Now that's a constructive suggestion. The animator could go back and say, let me think about it. Right? So the silences are yes, but that will never work. I don't see that happening, and we aren't staffed for that. Whereas amplifiers are yes, and what if we try this? How might we do this? And let's try to reallocate. So what's happening in this is two or three things. Now let's try and put this into our context as managers, as leaders. Meetings take a lot of time, especially if it goes round and round in circles. If you as a manager, as a leader, can make this rule and say, don't do this, because it was done with us when we are in one of our projects. This rule was put into place and it worked beautifully. But think about this. If you can actually save 20 minutes per person per meeting, and let's say the person has 3 meetings, 1 hour per week, 52 hours per annum, let's round it down to 50 hours per annum. Let's say that it's a 10,000 person organization, out of which 50% of the organization is impacted, which means 5,000 people. We are talking about 250,000 hours of saved time just by implementing it, and productivity goes up and positivity goes up in the organization. Add a dollar value to 250,000 hours there, and you know how much you are saving. Always come with a suggestion if you want to report a problem. That's great, Vikram. Right. So plussing was something that worked very beautifully for Pixar. They were leaders, they are leaders because of this. They have other problems, but that's okay. They have done very well. We've used this very well in our meetings, and I must give the credit to this to my COO Sukumar Rajagopal, who introduced me to this term. So that's my tip. I told Vijay I would give you a tip about saving time on meetings. It looks fairly innocuous. It can really work if you are disciplined about it. So can you go on to the next one, please? Okay, I'm not going to go through this completely. I want to thank Vijay Narayanan here, because he was the one who brought this out when we were speaking a couple of days back, and he talked about the need to communicate, because we are all working in different places. There's no place to hide. Everybody needs to know what you're doing. So 3 basic things that I will leave with you. One is communicate. Second is watch out for the bias, and especially unconscious bias in the virtual workplace. And third, keep connecting with your teams, because the isolation increases the pressure and there's conflict between people, which you may never know unless you are working with the teams. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a moment to take questions before I need 2 or 3 minutes to round up. So what I covered,
we've done very well for the time. I think we're 7:15, so that leaves us with 15 minutes of Q&As.
I have a question. Can I ask?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, please.
Give me a minute. Okay. First thing is a leader born, or following all the principles which you said, and also reading books? Can I become a leader? My opinion is a leader is born. He cannot be created. That's number one. Second point is, I have about 3 points, maybe 4. If you read the history of India for the past 300-400 years, we have always been slaves. We were never leaders. If you read some book called Wounded Civilization, which explains the same thing, Indians are not leaders. Currently, if you speak in the past maybe 25 years, because of IT, people have entered in a global way. And I have worked abroad, and I've interacted with Indians and non-Indians, and I've never seen an Indian, even if he is given an authority, behaving like a leader. He was always behaving like a slave. So my question again is, by reading this, by reading hundreds of books, can anyone become a leader, or leader is just born, he cannot be made?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. Is it Anandan? Who asked the question? Is it Anandan?
Yes,
I believe so.
Okay, Anandan. Thank you, Anandan. This is fairly a large question to answer. Let me Okay, you are saying that leaders are born, they are not made. That's what you're saying, right?
That's exactly correct.
Okay. Can leaders be made because they read books?
My opinion is I've not seen in practice, which I gave you examples, even people who have been given authority, even if he's a CEO, I've never seen a leader. The definition which you have given a leader itself, I am questioning it. Leader, in your presentation, you mentioned that you go down to somebody else's mind and try to solve. My opinion is, no matter what the other person thinks, no matter what the conflict is, no matter how the perception of this, a true leader is one who makes his thing and make the other person follow you rather than go down to his level.
Absolutely. A true leader is someone who, what you're saying is a true leader is someone who will get the other person to follow, correct?
Yes, because there is always two categories, leader and followers. I don't go down to the follower level.
Okay, so today, when we look at stakeholders, and I want to make that distinction, are stakeholders necessarily followers? What do you think?
If it is a leader and if his solution is good, and if the stakeholders trust him,
right?
You said influence. The influence comes right at the beginning. When the leader walks into the room, he always brings an aura around himself. So automatically, all the stakeholders drop their own opinions and try to follow. That is a leader.
Correct. So how does that person develop that?
There is no development. That's what I'm saying. It's instantly. Just 5 minutes is enough for the leader to make himself present as a leader. He doesn't require more than 5 minutes.
So, so if I understand you right, what you are saying is that leaders are always born; they are never made.
Yes, and if you pick up 5 people in history, consider those people as leaders. You see them as compared to people who have been made as leaders and failed.
Okay. And you did also say that Indians are not leaders.
Absolutely. I don't see any example. Maybe there are stray 1 or 2 cases here and there. Sundar Pichai, for instance. But the very fact that he is an exception proves the rule.
So let me ask another question.
Sudhir, sorry, Sudhir. We've got so many other questions as well. So could we move on to the next one?
Yeah, so we will take that offline.
I do appreciate. Yeah, there are many questions that are popping up. So if I could move on to the next one, which is from Jacob Rajesh.
I withdraw.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to have this conversation with you offline, Anandan. I'm glad you took the time to bring it up.
Right. So the next one is from Jacob, who says, "What approach do we need to apply when a person keeps making fundamental mistakes? What else can work if we don't criticize?"
So if a person is making fundamental mistakes, there is something that is hurting him. So the thing is, actions and talk, they are like fever. Is Jacob there?
Jacob is there. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's on the call. Yes.
Jacob, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah. I'm
okay. Jacob, a very good question. Thank you for asking. Jacob, what is fever?
something body reacts when something not accepted enters into the body.
Absolutely. So is it a symptom or a cause?
It's a symptom.
Brilliant. So a fever is a symptom, which means the cause for that fever lies somewhere deep within, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And that is a trigger that causes that to happen. So whenever people say something, or there are certain actions. They are symptoms of something deeper. If we can find what is causing the problems by speaking to them and again, taking them out and figuring that out, if we reach that cause, we can fix that problem.
Yeah.
If we try, it could be as simple as the person, let's say that the person is a tester and they keep making mistakes. It could either be because there is a fundamental problem, a barrier that stops them from testing effectively, or that maybe they are better at being developers. So as leaders, we are also meant to find out what people are good at. So this could be the other aspect. So if we find out the root cause that is causing the problem to happen, the symptom. So look at words spoken and actions as symptoms and try to hit the root cause.
Yeah, thanks.
I've got the next question here. Sorry,
Sure.
just in the interest of time, I have 6 minutes to go. Right, so this is from Bhuvan. This question is, how do you manage upwards in these trying times?
Beautiful. I actually, for a very long time, everybody teaches you how to manage teams, how to manage clients, but managing upwards is something, at least I learned it the hard way after failing several times. Have a conversation with your boss and find out what makes them successful. So we are talking about what's in it for your boss, right? The moment you have that conversation with the boss and look at what makes them successful, then the alignment will be much better. And I'm not talking about sucking up to the boss. I'm talking about the ethics and integrity of it being maintained. At the same time, finding out what makes the person successful. What is your boss and your boss's boss getting from there? That's number one. Number two, and this relates to how you deal with stakeholders. Many of them have very less time to digest information. And as we're growing up the ladder, we start giving them lots of information. Can you bring it down to what's in it for them and give it to them? Capsule. Practice doing it in 30 seconds, 1 minute, and giving them the business side. And that you can do if you understand what drives their capabilities, what drives their goals. So have a conversation with your boss. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's a very good tip,
Yes.
actually.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so next one's from Shanta Kumar. Project managers need to manage stakeholders. Consider a scenario where there are multiple stakeholders. Is it possible to manage all? And if not, how to do this effectively? Okay, that's a very broad question. Shanta, it needs a lot of time to work through that. But in the interest of time, do you know what your stakeholders want? Find that out and start working with them. What's in it for them? What they want. I'm going to repeat the same thing because that's what drives human behavior. And yes, it is possible to actually balance it. And what happens is sometimes you will have to do some adjustments between one stakeholder and another. You will never be able to satisfy everybody. Let's be very clear about that. But what works is if you are able to establish a relationship with them and you say, you know what, I am really sorry, I can't do this because of these reasons, and you're very open with them. Most stakeholders are fairly open to that. If the relationship is good, they will take it. So sometimes you can't satisfy everybody, but then a leader's job is also not to satisfy everybody. Sometimes they have to take tough decisions. If the relationship is good, explain the decision, people will take it. And that's where the relationship building becomes very critical. It's a kind of a roundabout explanation, but I hope that helped. Thank you, Sudhir. Okay, so 2 minutes, rapid fire, 2 questions, if that's okay with you. Yeah. There are many more questions. I really apologize to participants on this webinar.
What you can do is send the questions over to me, Vijay. I can try and answer them.
Yeah, definitely, yes. Okay, so the next two questions are one from Mr. Vasi, Venkatram Vasi. Do only good followers become good leaders? That's the first question.
See, the term good is a very it's a term that is very personal. To me, someone may be good, for someone else, someone may not be good. So I would not even go down that route of saying this person is good. And the reason I'm saying that is sometimes there are people who don't think the way they will. So I would rather think about it in the context of how we are as personalities. We are all different personalities. We are different biases. As long as we as leaders understand that we all have a bias and we are open to people around and we show that, then people will come and join with us. I know that I have a certain personality, but someone has an opposite personality. If I can live with that, then there are chances that they may say, hey, this guy is ready to listen to me and hear me out, and therefore they can start working together. So the good is a very it's not something that can be defined very well. I would love for that to be defined.
Thank you, Sudhir. One last question. This is from Lata Gopalakrishnan. I think this is there on most people's minds at the moment. In this COVID situation, there are many ramp downs and projects which are on hold. How can we be an optimistic leader and make the team also feel the same way?
Most of the time, and I'm going to go back to something that you said, Vijay, because it rang so true. There is a responsibility on both sides to connect with each other. The people on the team connecting with the leader and letting them know what's happening, and the leader to connect with the teams to reassure them that things are okay. And even if things are not okay, to talk about what can be done to tide over the situation, because they're very tough times. Communication and constant connect is the only way we can get through this together. And that's the job of a leader.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sudhir. I really appreciate you taking time today and sharing us your wisdom and shedding light on so many wonderful aspects of stakeholder management. And I hope people on this webinar have found it useful. So just bear with me 1 second. I just wanted to share the moment.
Yeah, I just want to give, while you share the presentation, the last slide, because I'd like people to see the last slide.
Sorry, apologies. One second.
No, that's fine. To all of you who are there, thank you so much for being patient listeners and for being so proactive and talking on chat with me. So I'm going to give you something there, and then there's a challenge there, right? Write down the names of your top 3 critical stakeholders, people who are responsible for your career going up or sometimes down if things don't go well, and rate the influence that you have with them on a scale of 0 to 10. Do they trust you implicitly, that they do not question your decisions? And that would be a 10. Now, where would you like to be with them in the next 6 months, and what kind of action plan can you put together to understand them better as stakeholders? But there's only one rating that you cannot put down. And that one rating, does anyone know?
Zero.
Oh, you can put 0, you can put -1, you can put 11. There's one rating we can't put. Absolutely, Dilip. Bang on. You got it. There's no one. Don't use 5, please. 5 is straddling the fence. Then you're not being honest. You can't sit on the fence. You're either this way or that. Yes, Venkatesh, halfway. Absolutely. So well done. And this is, of course, I'm not going to follow up with you. However, if you would like to speak to me about this offline, you're welcome to do that. I've summarized everything that we have spoken about. We are about 3 minutes beyond, and I think I will stop right here. I hope you had a good time. I had a lovely time talking to you.
Thank
So
you,
go to the
Sudhir.
last slide. Go to the last
sorry.
slide.
1 second. Yeah. Is this the one?
All the way to
no, I'm going backwards.
all
Yeah,
the
there
way
you
to
go.
yes. And this quote of Eisenhower talks about what leadership is. And thank you, Kaushik, because Kaushik got me introduced to Vijay. And thank you, Vijay, and to all of you there in India and the United States. Guys, have a nice evening. United States, have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Sudhir, if you could just stay online for just 30 seconds. I'm going to unmute everybody. So if you wouldn't mind just applauding Sudhir on this wonderful presentation. I think it would be wonderful. Sorry, yeah. I don't know if I can unmute everybody, but I think I have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye.
So there are a couple of questions that I'll send you separately.
This conference will now be recorded.